The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Natasha Williams pressed her face into her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The break room smelled of stale coffee and microwaved lunches, but she barely noticed. Her world was crashing down around her, piece by piece, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "You're pathetic," she whispered to herself, the words echoing the cruel assessment her supervisor had delivered just 20 minutes ago. Completely worthless. The morning had started like any other Tuesday at Morrison & Associates, the prestigious consulting firm where she worked as an executive assistant. But by 9:30 her entire life had been turned upside down. Her supervisor, Patricia Coleman, had called her into the conference room with that fake smile that never reached her eyes. "Natasha, darling," Patricia had said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "we need to have a little chat about your performance." The words that followed had cut through Natasha like broken glass. Incompetent. Unreliable. A liability to the company. Patricia had listed every minor mistake from the past month, turning innocent errors into evidence of complete failure. The worst part wasn't even the criticism, it was the threat that came at the end. "I'm putting you on probation," Patricia had announced, sliding a document across the mahogany table. "One more mistake and you're gone. We can't afford dead weight in this company." Dead weight. The phrase kept repeating in Natasha's mind as she sat alone in the break room, trying to hold herself together. She needed this job more than Patricia could ever understand. Her mother's medical bills were piling up, her younger brother needed money for college, and her father had been out of work for 6 months. This job wasn't just her livelihood, it was her family's lifeline. "I can't lose this job," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I just can't." The break room door opened quietly, and Natasha quickly wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. She expected to see one of her co-workers, maybe someone coming to grab their lunch from the refrigerator. Instead, a man in a custodial uniform stepped inside, pushing a cleaning cart. She had seen him around the building before, always in the background, emptying trash cans and mopping floors. He was tall and well-built, with kind brown eyes and a gentle smile that seemed genuine. Unlike most people in the building, he actually looked at her when they passed in the hallways, offering a polite nod or quiet, "Good morning." "Sorry," he said softly, pausing when he saw her distressed state. "I didn't know anyone was in here. I can come back later." "No, it's okay," Natasha said quickly, standing up and smoothing down her skirt. "I should get back to work anyway." But as she moved toward the door, her legs suddenly felt weak. The stress of the morning, combined with the fact that she hadn't eaten breakfast, finally caught up with her. She swayed slightly, reaching out to steady herself against the table. "Whoa there," the janitor said, quickly moving to her side. "You all right?" His hand was warm and steady on her arm, and there was genuine concern in his voice. It was such a simple gesture, but it was the first kindness anyone had shown her all day. The tears she had been trying to hold back suddenly burst forth like a dam breaking. "I'm sorry," she gasped, embarrassed by her breakdown in front of a stranger. "I'm such a mess. I don't even know why I'm telling you this, but I think I'm about to lose my job and I can't. I just can't afford for that to happen." The janitor guided her gently back to her chair, his expression full of compassion. "Hey, it's okay," he said, his voice calm and soothing. "Sometimes we all need to let it out. What's your name?" "Natasha," she managed between sniffles. "Natasha Williams." "I'm James," he replied, offering her a clean tissue from his pocket. "James Thompson. And whatever's going on, I'm sure it's not as bad as it seems right now." Natasha looked up at him through her tears, surprised by his kindness. In a building full of executives and professionals who barely acknowledged her existence, this custodial worker was the only one showing her genuine human compassion. "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "My supervisor hates me. She's looking for any excuse to fire me, and I've already made so many mistakes. My mom needs surgery, my brother needs tuition money, and my dad can't find work. If I lose this job..." She couldn't finish the sentence. The weight of her family's expectations and needs pressed down on her chest like a physical force. She was only 25 years old, but she felt like she was carrying the world on her shoulders. James knelt down beside her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. "Listen to me, Natasha," he said quietly. "I've been working in buildings like this for a long time and I've seen a lot of people come and go. You seem like a good person who's going through a rough patch. Things have a way of working out for good people." There was something about the way he spoke, a confidence and wisdom that seemed at odds with his humble uniform. His words carried weight as if he knew something she didn't. For the first time all morning, Natasha felt a tiny spark of hope. Thank you, she whispered. I know you don't know me, but thank you for listening. Most people in this building wouldn't even notice if I disappeared tomorrow. Well, I would notice, James said simply. And I have a feeling you're stronger than you think you are. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. He stood up and returned to his cleaning cart, but before leaving, he turned back to her. Natasha, can I give you some advice? Sometimes the people who seem the most powerful are actually the most insecure. Don't let someone else's insecurity become your truth. As he left the break room, Natasha sat in stunned silence. There had been something almost mystical about their encounter, as if this janitor had appeared at exactly the moment she needed him most. She didn't know anything about James Thompson, but somehow, his presence had given her the strength to face the rest of her day. Little did she know that the kind janitor who had just restored her faith was actually Jonathan Mitchell, the billionaire CEO of the parent company that owned Morrison & Associates. He had been working undercover for 3 months, trying to understand the real culture of his businesses from the ground up. What he had just witnessed in that break room had shaken him more than any board meeting ever could. As Jonathan wheeled his cleaning cart down the hallway, his jaw was set with determination. He had seen enough cruelty and incompetence in his short time undercover, but what Patricia Coleman had done to Natasha Williams was the last straw. Changes were coming to Morrison & Associates, whether they were ready or not. But first, he needed to help the beautiful, kind-hearted woman who had just touched his soul in ways he never expected. Natasha Williams had no idea that her life was about to change in the most extraordinary way possible. The rest of Tuesday passed in a blur of anxiety and forced smiles. Natasha threw herself into her work with desperate determination, double-checking every email and triple-checking every appointment. She couldn't afford another mistake, not when Patricia was watching her like a hawk, waiting for any excuse to pounce. By 5 o'clock, her nerves were frayed and her head was pounding, but she had made it through the day without incident. As she gathered her things to leave, she noticed a small envelope on her desk that hadn't been there before. Her name was written on it in neat handwriting. Inside she found a simple note: "Remember what I said about being stronger than you think. Tomorrow is a fresh start. JT." Natasha smiled for the first time all day. The janitor James had actually taken the time to leave her an encouraging note. In a world where she felt invisible, someone had seen her pain and cared enough to reach out. The next morning, Natasha arrived at work 15 minutes early, determined to prove Patricia wrong. She organized her desk, prepared her daily task list, and reviewed all of Patricia's meetings for the day. Everything was perfect, or so she thought. At 10:15, Patricia stormed out of her office like a tornado in a power suit. "Williams," she snapped. "Where is the Henderson contract? It's supposed to be on my desk right now." Natasha's heart sank. She had prepared the Henderson contract yesterday and placed it in Patricia's inbox, exactly as requested. "I put it in your inbox yesterday afternoon," she said carefully. "Let me check." "Don't tell me what you did or didn't do," Patricia interrupted, her voice rising. "The contract isn't there, which means you forgot to do your job." Again. Other employees were starting to stare, and Natasha felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She knew she had prepared that contract. She remembered printing it, reviewing it, and placing it in the exact spot where Patricia always wanted important documents. "I'm sure Natasha began, but Patricia cut her off. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Patricia said loudly, clearly enjoying the spectacle. "Unreliable, unprofessional, and now you're arguing with me about your own mistakes." Just then, James appeared around the corner with his cleaning cart. He must have heard the commotion because he paused, his eyes taking in the scene with quiet intensity. Natasha caught his gaze for just a moment, and she saw something flash in his eyes, something that looked almost like anger. "I'll find the contract right away," Natasha said quickly, wanting to end the public humiliation. "I'll have it to you within the hour." "You'd better," Patricia snarled before stalking back into her office and slamming the door. The other employees slowly returned to their work, leaving Natasha standing alone in the middle of the office, her face burning with shame. She felt tears threatening again, but she refused to cry in front of everyone. Not again. "Excuse me, miss?" Natasha turned to find James approaching with his cart. He spoke in a low voice so only she could hear. "I was emptying the trash in Mrs. Coleman's office yesterday evening," he said quietly. "I might have accidentally knocked some papers off her desk. Could be that your document got mixed up with other things." Hope flickered in Natasha's chest. "Really?" James nodded. "I put everything back, but things might have gotten shuffled around. Check her desk under the other papers. Sometimes important things get buried." "Thank you," Natasha whispered. I don't know how to repay you for being so kind. No need, James said with that gentle smile of his. We all need someone looking out for us sometimes. 20 minutes later, Natasha found the Henderson contract exactly where James had suggested, buried under a stack of other documents on Patricia's desk. Her hands shook with relief as she realized what had almost happened. Patricia would have used this missing contract as grounds for immediate termination, and Natasha would never have been able to prove her innocence. When she delivered the contract to Patricia, her supervisor barely looked up. About time, Patricia muttered, as if the whole incident had been Natasha's fault from the beginning. But Natasha didn't care about Patricia's attitude. She was just grateful that James had been there to help her find the truth. Twice now, this mysterious janitor had appeared at exactly the right moment to save her from disaster. During her lunch break, Natasha sought out James. She found him in the supply closet, restocking cleaning supplies. James? She called softly. He turned around and she was struck again by how kind his eyes were. There was something else there too, an intelligence and depth that seemed unusual for someone in his position. Not that there was anything wrong with custodial work, but James carried himself with a quiet confidence that suggested he was capable of much more. Thank you, she said simply, for helping me find that contract. You saved my job today. I'm just glad things worked out, he replied. How are you feeling? Better than yesterday, I hope? Much better, thanks to you. Natasha hesitated, then decided to be bold. Would you like to have lunch sometime? I mean, just as friends? I'd like to properly thank you for being so kind to me. Something flickered in James's expression, surprise, maybe, or something deeper. I'd like that, he said finally. But you don't owe me anything, Natasha. Kindness shouldn't be something you have to repay. Maybe not, she agreed, but friendship is something worth sharing. As the days passed, Natasha found herself looking forward to her brief encounters with James. He had a way of appearing whenever she needed him most, offering an encouraging word when Patricia was being particularly cruel, or helping her solve small problems that seemed insurmountable. There was the day her computer crashed and she thought she'd lost hours of work. James happened to be cleaning nearby and quietly suggested she check the auto recovery folder. Her work was saved. There was the morning she spilled coffee all over important documents. James appeared with special cleaning supplies that removed every stain, making the papers look brand new. Each time, his help seemed almost magical in its timing and effectiveness. Natasha began to wonder if James Thompson was her guardian angel in disguise. What she didn't know was that James Thompson was actually Jonathan Mitchell, and his help wasn't coincidental at all. He had access to every computer system in the building, every security camera, and every piece of information about what was happening in his company. When Patricia Coleman tried to sabotage Natasha, Jonathan was watching. When problems arose, he made sure solutions appeared. But it wasn't just about justice anymore. Somewhere in the past week, Jonathan had found himself thinking about Natasha Williams at all hours of the day and night. Her genuine gratitude, her determination despite adversity, her kindness to others even when she was struggling, everything about her drew him in. He had dated plenty of women in his social circle, but they had all been interested in his money and status. Natasha was falling for James the janitor, a man she thought had nothing to offer but kindness and integrity. For the first time in his life, Jonathan was experiencing what it felt like to be loved for who he truly was, not what he owned. The only problem was that everything was built on a lie. And the longer he waited to tell her the truth, the harder it would become to explain why he had deceived her. But for now, Jonathan was content to be James Thompson, the humble janitor who got to see Natasha Williams smile every day. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but today he was exactly where he wanted to be. 3 weeks had passed since that first encounter in the break room, and Jonathan Mitchell was living a double life that was becoming increasingly complicated. By day he was James Thompson, the quiet janitor who emptied trash cans and mopped floors. By night, he returned to his penthouse apartment, reviewing reports and making executive decisions that affected thousands of employees across his business empire. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had started this undercover operation to understand the real problems in his companies, but what he had discovered was something far more personal and precious than corporate inefficiencies. He had found Natasha Williams, and she was changing everything he thought he knew about himself. Jonathan stood in his home office, still dressed in his custodial uniform, staring at the wall of monitors that displayed real-time data from all his companies. Morrison and Associates was just one small part of his empire, but it had become the most important part because that's where she was. His phone buzzed with a text from his personal assistant, Rebecca. Board meeting moved to 7 a.m. tomorrow. Need your approval on the Henderson Industries acquisition by midnight. Jonathan sighed and loosened his janitor's tie. The Henderson Industries deal was worth $200 million, but all he could think about was the way Natasha's face had lit up when he'd helped her find that Henderson contract weeks ago. She had no idea that he owned the company that was about to acquire Henderson Industries, just like she had no idea that he owned the building where she worked every day. The next morning, Jonathan arrived at Morrison & Associates at his usual time, but instead of heading straight to the custodial closet, he made a detour past Natasha's desk. She was already there, as always, carefully organizing her workspace for the day ahead. "Morning, Natasha," he said quietly, pausing with his cleaning cart. She looked up and smiled, that beautiful, genuine smile that never failed to make his heart skip a beat. "Good morning, James. You're here early today." "Couldn't sleep," he admitted, which was the truth. He'd been up until 3 in the morning reviewing acquisition documents. "How about you? Everything okay?" Natasha's smile faltered slightly. "Patricia has a big presentation today for some important clients. She's been extra demanding all week, making sure everything is perfect." Jonathan knew about the presentation. In fact, he knew exactly who the important clients were: representatives from Mitchell Corporation, his own company, who were evaluating Morrison & Associates for a potential partnership. The irony was almost overwhelming. "I'm sure you'll handle everything perfectly," he said, meaning it completely. In the weeks he'd been watching her work, he'd been consistently impressed by her attention to detail and professional competence. Patricia Coleman was too blind and petty to recognize the treasure she had in Natasha Williams. "Thanks, James. Your confidence in me means more than you know." If only she knew how much confidence he really had in her. Jonathan had already made his decision about Morrison & Associates, and it had everything to do with the woman sitting in front of him. Later that morning, Jonathan observed the presentation from his position cleaning windows in the adjacent conference room. Through the glass, he could see Patricia Coleman in full performance mode, taking credit for work that Jonathan knew Natasha had done. Every chart, every analysis, every perfectly formatted document had Natasha's fingerprints on it, but Patricia presented it all as her own brilliance. The Mitchell Corporation representatives were polite but unimpressed. Jonathan had briefed them beforehand about what to look for, and they were seeing exactly what he had described: a company with good underlying work being undermined by poor management and toxic leadership. During the lunch break, Jonathan excused himself from his janitorial duties and slipped into the empty boardroom where the presentation materials were set up. He had legitimate access to the building's security systems, so disabling the cameras in this room for a few minutes was simple. He photographed every document, noting which ones showed clear evidence of Natasha's work versus Patricia's contributions. The difference was striking. Natasha's analysis was thorough, insightful, and strategically sound, while Patricia's additions were superficial and occasionally inaccurate. As he was finishing, Jonathan heard voices in the hallway. He quickly gathered his cleaning supplies and was polishing the conference table when Patricia and the Mitchell Corporation representatives returned from lunch. "As you can see," Patricia was saying, "we maintain the highest standards of excellence in everything we do." Jonathan bit back a bitter laugh. If Patricia only knew that the billionaire CEO she was trying to impress was standing 3 feet away from her, dressed in a janitor's uniform and listening to every word. The presentation continued, and Jonathan watched his representatives take notes. He knew they would give him a full report later, but he had already seen enough to make his decision. Morrison & Associates had potential, but it would require significant changes in leadership. After the clients left, Jonathan returned to his normal duties, but he was distracted by thoughts of what came next. His undercover operation had served its purpose. He now understood exactly what was wrong with this company and how to fix it. But ending his time as James Thompson would mean revealing the truth to Natasha, and he wasn't sure he was ready for that conversation. That evening, as Jonathan was preparing to leave, he found Natasha still at her desk, looking exhausted but relieved. "How did the presentation go?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "I think it went well," she said, gathering her things. Patricia seemed happy with how everything turned out. Jonathan felt a surge of anger on her behalf. Patricia had taken full credit for Natasha's work, and Natasha was so humble and kind that she didn't even recognize the injustice. "I'm sure you played a big part in making it successful," he said carefully. Natasha shrugged. "I just did my job. Patricia is the one with the expertise and experience." "Natasha," Jonathan said, unable to keep quiet any longer, "don't sell yourself short. I've seen how hard you work, how much attention you pay to details. You're more capable than you give yourself credit for." She looked at him with surprise. "How would you know that?" Jonathan realized he had revealed too much. A janitor wouldn't normally have insights into the quality of an executive assistant's work. "I notice things," he said simply. "I see how dedicated you are, how much you care about doing things right. That's rare." There was something in his voice that made Natasha look at him more closely. For a moment, Jonathan felt exposed, as if she might see through his disguise to the truth underneath. "James," she said slowly, "sometimes I feel like there's more to you than meets the eye. You speak like someone who understands business, and you always seem to know exactly what to say." Jonathan's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "I don't know exactly. It's just a feeling. Like you're not really—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "Never mind. I'm probably just tired." But as they walked to the elevator together, Jonathan could feel her watching him with new curiosity. His disguise was getting harder to maintain, especially when he cared so much about her well-being. Every instinct told him to protect her, to use his real power and influence to make her life better, but doing so would expose his deception. As the elevator doors closed and they stood side by side, Jonathan made a decision. Soon, very soon, he would have to tell Natasha Williams the truth about who he really was. He only hoped that when that moment came, she would be able to forgive him for the lies and see the genuine feelings that had grown between them. The question was whether a billionaire CEO and a struggling executive assistant could bridge the gap between their two worlds, or whether his deception would destroy any chance they had at real love. The next few weeks brought a routine that Jonathan had never experienced in his privileged life. Every morning he would arrive at Morrison & Associates in his custodial uniform, and every morning, Natasha would greet him with a warm smile that made everything else fade away. Their friendship was growing stronger each day, built on conversations during coffee breaks and stolen moments when Patricia wasn't watching. "You know," Natasha said one Tuesday afternoon as they sat in the break room sharing a bag of chips, "I've been thinking about what you said last week about pursuing my dreams. I used to want to start my own consulting business someday." Jonathan looked up from his sandwich, intrigued. "What kind of consulting?" "Business strategy and organizational development. I know it sounds crazy considering I'm just an assistant, but I have a degree in business administration from Howard University. I graduated summa cum laude, actually." She laughed self-consciously. "I'm sorry, I don't usually brag about that stuff." "That's not bragging," Jonathan said firmly. "That's impressive. Why aren't you using your degree?" Natasha's expression grew sad. "When I graduated, my dad got sick and couldn't work. Mom was already struggling with her own health issues. I took the first job I could find that paid enough to help support the family. That was 3 years ago, and here I am, still." "Still what?" "Still feeling like I'm wasting my education and my potential. Some days I wonder if I'll ever get out of this place." Jonathan felt a familiar surge of anger at the system that had trapped someone as talented as Natasha in a dead-end position with an abusive supervisor. But he also felt something else: excitement at the possibility of helping her achieve her dreams. "What if you didn't have to choose between helping your family and pursuing your career?" he asked carefully. "That's a nice thought, but reality doesn't work that way. Dreams are for people who can afford them." "I don't believe that," Jonathan said with conviction. "I think dreams are for people who are brave enough to chase them. And you, Natasha Williams, are one of the bravest people I know." She looked at him with that expression he was beginning to recognize, surprise mixed with curiosity, as if she was trying to figure out how a janitor could speak with such authority about business and dreams. "Sometimes you say things that make me wonder who you really are, James Thompson," she said quietly. Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "You talk like someone who's been successful in business. You understand concepts that most people wouldn't even think about. And there's something about the way you carry yourself." She shook her head. "I'm probably imagining things." "What if you're not?" Jonathan asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. They stared at each other across the small break room table, and Jonathan felt the weight of his deception pressing down on him. He wanted to tell her everything: who he was, why he was really there, how much she had come to mean to him. But he also knew that revealing the truth could destroy the genuine connection they had built. Before either of them could say more, Patricia's voice echoed through the office. "Williams, where are you? I need those reports now." Natasha sighed and stood up. "Duty calls. Thanks for listening, James. It means more than you know to have someone who believes in me." As she hurried back to her desk, Jonathan remained in the break room, wrestling with his conscience. He was falling in love with Natasha Williams, but their entire relationship was built on a lie. How could he continue to deceive someone he cared about so deeply? That evening, instead of going straight home, Jonathan drove to his private office in the Mitchell Corporation building. He needed to think, and he always thought better in the space where he had built his empire from nothing. His personal assistant, Rebecca, was surprised to see him so late. "Sir? I thought you were working on the Morrison project tonight." "Change of plans," Jonathan said, loosening his janitor's uniform tie. "Rebecca, I need you to research something for me. Natasha Williams, she's an executive assistant at Morrison & Associates. I want to know everything about her background, her family situation, her financial status. But do it discreetly." Rebecca raised an eyebrow but didn't question her boss's unusual request. She had learned long ago that Jonathan Mitchell had his reasons for everything, even when those reasons weren't immediately apparent. 2 days later, Rebecca handed Jonathan a comprehensive file on Natasha Williams. As he read through it, his admiration for her only grew. She had indeed graduated summa cum laude from Howard University with a degree in business administration. Her professors had written glowing recommendations, praising her analytical mind and leadership potential. The financial information was more sobering. Her father, Robert Williams, had been laid off from his manufacturing job 18 months ago and hadn't been able to find steady work since. Her mother, Grace Williams, had diabetes and required expensive medications and regular medical care. Her younger brother, Marcus Williams, was a sophomore at community college, working part-time to help pay for his education. Natasha was supporting her entire family on an executive assistant's salary, which explained why she couldn't afford to take risks with her career. Every dollar she earned was already spoken for. But what really caught Jonathan's attention was a note at the end of the file. Natasha had applied for several business analyst and junior consultant positions at various firms over the past year, but had been turned down for each one. The rejection letters were polite but consistent. She lacked direct experience in consulting despite her strong educational background. Jonathan set the file aside and stared out the window at the city lights below. He had the power to change Natasha's life with a single phone call. He could offer her a position at Mitchell Corporation that would pay her 3 times what she was making now. He could arrange for her mother's medical bills to be covered by his company's charitable foundation. He could make all her problems disappear. But if he did any of those things, she would know that James Thompson wasn't who he claimed to be. And if she discovered his deception through his actions rather than his honesty, she might never forgive him. The next morning, Jonathan arrived at Morrison & Associates with a new determination. He would find a way to help Natasha that didn't compromise his identity, at least not yet. He wasn't ready to lose what they had built together. His opportunity came sooner than expected. As he was emptying trash cans near the reception area, he overheard Patricia on the phone with someone from the corporate office. "Yes, I understand the client wants additional analysis," Patricia was saying in her most professional voice. "Of course we can handle that. I'll have my team work on it over the weekend." After Patricia hung up, Jonathan watched her walk straight to Natasha's desk. "Williams, I need you to stay late tonight and work through the weekend. The Henderson Industries client wants expanded market analysis, and it has to be perfect." "Of course," Natasha said without hesitation. "What specific areas should I focus on?" "Everything. Market trends, competitive analysis, growth projections. You know what needs to be done." As Patricia walked away, Jonathan saw Natasha's shoulders slump slightly. She had mentioned earlier that she was supposed to visit her parents this weekend, the first time she'd been able to take time off in months. That evening, as the office emptied out, Jonathan found Natasha still at her desk, surrounded by research materials and financial reports. She looked exhausted but determined. "Working late again?" he asked gently. "Weekend project," she explained. "Big client presentation on Monday. Patricia is counting on me to make it perfect." Jonathan noticed that she didn't say Patricia would be working on it too, just that Patricia was counting on her to make it perfect. Once again, Patricia was taking credit for work she wasn't even doing. "Need any help?" Jonathan offered. "I know I'm just the janitor, but I'm pretty good with research and analysis." Natasha looked up at him with surprise. "You'd be willing to help me with business analysis?" "I have some experience with that kind of thing," Jonathan said, which was certainly true. "And I hate seeing you stressed out." For the next 3 hours, Jonathan worked alongside Natasha, helping her organize data, identify key trends, and develop strategic recommendations. He was careful to let her lead the analysis while providing subtle guidance and suggestions. Watching her mind work was a revelation. She was brilliant at connecting disparate pieces of information and drawing insightful conclusions. "James, this is incredible work," Natasha said as they finished the final section. "How did you learn to think strategically like this?" I've always been interested in business, Jonathan said carefully. I read a lot, take online courses. You learn things when you pay attention. You're amazing, she said, and the genuine admiration in her voice made Jonathan's heart soar. I don't know how to thank you. Seeing you succeed is thanks enough, he replied, meaning every word. As they packed up to leave, Natasha impulsively reached out and squeezed Jonathan's hand. I know I keep saying this, but you're unlike anyone I've ever met. Most people in your position would never. In my position? Jonathan interrupted, curious about what she was thinking. You know what I mean. Most people wouldn't go out of their way to help someone like me. Especially with something this important to my career. Jonathan realized she was talking about the perceived class difference between a janitor and an executive assistant. The irony was staggering. If she only knew the real difference in their positions, she might not be so grateful for his help. Natasha, he said seriously, never think of yourself as someone like you in a negative way. You're brilliant, hardworking, and kind. Any company would be lucky to have you. She smiled, but there was something wistful in her expression. I hope someday I'll work somewhere that sees those qualities in me. You will, Jonathan promised, and he meant to make sure of it. As they walked to the parking garage together, Jonathan felt the weight of his secret growing heavier. Every moment he spent with Natasha made him care about her more, but it also made his deception more painful. She was falling for James Thompson, the humble janitor who understood her struggles. What would happen when she discovered that James Thompson didn't exist? But as he watched her drive away in her modest sedan, Jonathan made a decision. He would find a way to help her achieve her dreams without revealing his identity, at least not yet. He wasn't ready to risk losing what they had built together, even if it meant living a lie a little longer. The weekend project would be just the beginning. Jonathan Mitchell had resources that James Thompson could never have, and he was determined to use them to change Natasha Williams' life, one careful step at a time. Monday morning brought unexpected chaos to Morrison & Associates. Natasha had arrived early to put the finishing touches on the Henderson Industries analysis, but at 8:15 her phone rang with news that shattered her carefully organized world. Natasha, honey, you need to come to the hospital. Her mother's voice was weak and frightened. Your father collapsed this morning. The doctors are saying his heart. The phone slipped from Natasha's trembling hands, clattering onto her desk. James, who had been emptying the trash nearby, immediately noticed her distress and hurried over. Natasha? What's wrong? My dad, she whispered, her face pale with shock. He's in the hospital. Heart attack. I need to go, but Patricia will kill me if I leave before the presentation. Jonathan felt his own heart clench with sympathy and anger. Here was a woman facing a family emergency, and her first thought was about her cruel supervisor's reaction. Forget about Patricia, he said firmly. Your family needs you. Go. But the presentation is in 2 hours. All that work we did over the weekend. We'll still be there when you get back, Jonathan interrupted. Natasha, your father is more important than any presentation. Go to your family. Tears filled her eyes as the reality of the situation hit her. I can't afford to lose this job, James. If Patricia fires me for leaving during a crisis presentation, I'll never find another position that pays enough to help with Dad's medical bills. Jonathan wanted to tell her that she would never have to worry about money again, that he could take care of her family's medical expenses with a single phone call. But James Thompson couldn't make such promises, and revealing his true identity in this moment would only add to her stress. Let me help you, he said instead. I'll stay here and make sure everything is ready for the presentation. If Patricia has questions, I'll explain that you had a family emergency. You can't do that, Natasha protested. She barely tolerates me talking to you as it is. If she thinks you're covering for me, I don't care what she thinks, Jonathan said with such conviction that Natasha looked at him in surprise. Your family is what matters right now. Trust me to handle things here. Natasha stared at him for a long moment, and Jonathan could see her internal struggle. Finally, she nodded and grabbed her purse. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what I did to deserve a friend like you. As she hurried toward the elevator, Jonathan was already formulating a plan. He had resources at his disposal that James Thompson shouldn't have, but he was going to use them anyway. Natasha Williams was not going to lose her job over a family crisis, not on his watch. The presentation was scheduled for 10 o'clock, and at 9:45, Patricia emerged from her office looking polished and confident. She scanned the reception area, clearly expecting to see Natasha waiting with all the materials perfectly organized. Where is Williams? She demanded when she spotted Jonathan arranging papers at Natasha's desk. She had a family emergency, Jonathan explained calmly. Her father had a heart attack this morning. She's at the hospital. Patricia's face twisted with anger. Today? She chose today to have a family crisis? This is the most important presentation of the quarter. Jonathan felt his carefully maintained cover slipping as rage coursed through him. I don't think heart attacks follow anyone's schedule, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Don't get smart with me, Patricia snapped. You're just the janitor. Where are the presentation materials? Please tell me she at least finished her work before running off. Everything is ready, Jonathan assured her, gesturing to the neatly organized stack of documents, charts, and digital presentations. The analysis is complete and comprehensive. Patricia snatched up the materials and began flipping through them. Her expression gradually changed from anger to surprise to something resembling awe. This is actually quite good, she admitted reluctantly. Better than I expected from her. Jonathan bit back his response. The analysis wasn't just good, it was exceptional. Natasha had insights that would impress executives at Fortune 500 companies, but Patricia was too self-absorbed to recognize the brilliance of her own assistant. The clients are here, Patricia announced, smoothing her hair. I suppose I'll have to handle this presentation alone. As Patricia walked toward the conference room, Jonathan made a decision that would have consequences he couldn't yet foresee. He quietly slipped into the adjacent room, where he could observe the presentation through the connecting door. What he witnessed over the next hour made his blood boil. Patricia presented every single one of Natasha's insights as her own original thinking. She took credit for analysis that had taken Natasha hours to develop, for strategic recommendations that showcased Natasha's brilliant understanding of market dynamics. The client's representatives from a major consulting firm looking to partner with Morrison & Associates were clearly impressed. They asked detailed questions about methodology and data sources, questions that Patricia answered with vague generalities while claiming credit for work she hadn't done. This level of strategic thinking is exactly what we're looking for in a partner, one of the clients said. Ms. Coleman, your analysis of the Henderson Industries market position is particularly insightful. Thank you, Patricia replied smoothly. I pride myself on thorough research and innovative thinking. Jonathan wanted to storm into that conference room and expose Patricia's lies, but he couldn't do that without revealing his own deception. Instead, he returned to his custodial duties, planning his next move carefully. Later that afternoon, Natasha called from the hospital. James? How did the presentation go? Did Patricia manage okay without me? The presentation went well, Jonathan said carefully. The client seemed very impressed with the analysis. Oh, thank goodness. At least one crisis is handled. How's Patricia's mood? Is she furious with me? Jonathan looked across the office to where Patricia was holding court with several colleagues, basking in praise for her brilliant presentation. She seems fine, he said, not trusting himself to say more. How's your father? He asked, changing the subject. Stable, but he needs surgery. The doctors say it's going to be expensive even with insurance. I don't know how we're going to manage the costs, especially if I end up losing my job over leaving today. You're not going to lose your job, Jonathan said firmly. And your father is going to be fine. Sometimes things work out better than we expect. I hope you're right, Natasha said, but he could hear the worry in her voice. I should go. The doctor wants to talk to us about Dad's treatment options. After hanging up, Jonathan sat in the supply closet, wrestling with the most difficult decision of his life. He had the power to solve all of Natasha's problems immediately. A single phone call could ensure her father received the best cardiac care available. Another call could guarantee her job security. A third call could set up a trust fund that would support her entire family for generations. But doing any of those things would require revealing who he really was, and he wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. Their relationship was still too new, too fragile. What if she felt manipulated by his deception? What if she thought everything between them had been calculated? Instead, Jonathan decided on a more subtle approach. That evening, he made several phone calls from his real office, using his real identity but requesting complete discretion. The first call went to Dr. Michael Harrison, chief of cardiology at Presbyterian Hospital, where Natasha's father was being treated. Jonathan had donated millions to the hospital over the years, and Dr. Harrison took his call immediately. Dr. Harrison, I have a special request. A patient named Robert Williams was admitted today with a heart attack. I want to ensure he receives the absolute best care available, regardless of his insurance coverage. Send any additional costs to the Mitchell Foundation's Medical Assistance Fund. Of course, Mr. Mitchell. Is this patient connected to someone in your organization? Let's just say he's important to someone I care about. And doctor? This needs to be handled with complete discretion. The family shouldn't know where the additional support is coming from. The second call went to his head of human resources at the parent company that owned Morrison and Associates. I want a complete review of Patricia Coleman's management practices at Morrison and Associates. I have reason to believe she's creating a hostile work environment and taking credit for subordinates' work. Document everything carefully. Should we inform Ms. Coleman that she's under review? Absolutely not. I want this investigation to be completely confidential until we have all the facts. As Jonathan hung up the phone, he felt a mixture of satisfaction and guilt. He was using his real power to help Natasha, but she would never know it was him. In her mind, these would be fortunate coincidences, not the calculated intervention of a man who was falling in love with her. The next morning, Natasha returned to work looking exhausted but relieved. Her father's surgery had been scheduled, and mysteriously, the hospital had informed them that additional financial assistance was available through a medical foundation. It's like a miracle, she told James during their morning coffee. The doctors say Dad is going to get the same level of care as their private patients, and the foundation is covering everything our insurance doesn't. That's wonderful news, Jonathan said, meaning it completely. I keep thinking there must be some mistake, Natasha continued. Things like this don't usually happen to people like us. But the hospital administrator assured us everything is legitimate. Maybe someone upstairs is looking out for you, Jonathan suggested. Maybe, Natasha agreed. Or maybe there are more good people in the world than I realized. As she smiled at him with gratitude and hope, Jonathan felt his heart break a little. She was crediting divine intervention or random kindness for help that he had provided. He wanted to tell her the truth, wanted her to know that he would move heaven and earth to keep her safe and happy. But for now he would remain James Thompson, the janitor who happened to be in the right place at the right time. The man who was falling more deeply in love with her every day, even as he lived a lie that was becoming harder to maintain. Soon, very soon, he would have to make a choice between protecting his secret and protecting his heart. And Jonathan Mitchell was beginning to realize that his heart was going to win. 2 weeks after her father's surgery, Natasha's life had settled into a new rhythm of cautious optimism. Robert Williams was recovering well, thanks to what the family believed was an incredible stroke of luck with medical funding. But as one crisis resolved, another emerged that would test Jonathan's ability to help without revealing himself. Patricia Coleman had been in an unusually good mood since the Henderson Industries presentation, riding high on praise for work that wasn't her own. But her treatment of Natasha hadn't improved. If anything, it had gotten worse. Success had made Patricia more arrogant and demanding than ever. Williams, Patricia called out on a Thursday morning, her voice sharp with irritation. I need you to redo the entire quarterly report. The formatting is completely wrong. Natasha looked up from her desk, confused. But we went over the formatting requirements yesterday. I followed them exactly. Don't argue with me, Patricia interrupted. If I say it's wrong, it's wrong. And I need it finished by 5 o'clock today. Jonathan, who was cleaning windows nearby, watched Natasha's shoulders slump in defeat. The quarterly report was 30 pages long and had taken her 2 days to complete the first time. Redoing it in 8 hours while maintaining her other responsibilities would be nearly impossible. Of course, Natasha said quietly. I'll get right on it. As Patricia stalked back to her office, Jonathan approached Natasha's desk under the pretense of emptying her trash can. The formatting looked perfect to me when I saw it yesterday, he said quietly. Natasha glanced around to make sure Patricia couldn't hear them. It was perfect. She's just looking for reasons to criticize me. I think she's still angry about me leaving during the Henderson presentation. That's not fair, Jonathan said, struggling to keep his voice level. Fair doesn't matter in Patricia's world, Natasha replied with bitter resignation. I just need to keep my head down and do what she says. I can't afford to make waves. But as the day progressed, Patricia's demands became increasingly unreasonable. She criticized Natasha's choice of font, then changed her mind and demanded a different one. She requested additional data analysis, then declared it unnecessary an hour later. By 4 o'clock, Natasha was practically in tears, frantically trying to complete an impossible task. Jonathan couldn't stand it anymore. During his afternoon break, he went to his car and made a phone call using his real identity. Rebecca, I need you to do something for me. Contact the Human Resources Department at Morrison and Associates and request an immediate meeting with Patricia Coleman. Tell them it's regarding the Henderson Industries presentation. What should be the purpose of the meeting, sir? They're going to offer her a promotion. Senior Vice President of Client Relations at our downtown office. Better salary, better title, starts Monday. Sir? Are you sure about this? You've been investigating her for potential termination. Trust me, Rebecca. This is part of a larger plan. Patricia Coleman is going to accept this promotion, and she's going to be out of Morrison and Associates by the end of the week. And the position she's vacating? Will be filled by someone much more qualified. I'll send you the details later. At 4:30, Patricia received a phone call that changed everything. Jonathan watched from across the office as her expression shifted from annoyance to surprise to barely contained excitement. Yes, of course I'm interested, Patricia said into the phone. Senior Vice President? That's a significant step up from my current position. Natasha looked up from her computer, where she was still desperately trying to finish the impossible report revision. Monday? Well, that's very soon, but I suppose, yes, I can make that work. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Patricia hung up the phone and immediately began packing her personal items, completely forgetting about the quarterly report she had demanded be finished by 5 o'clock. Williams, she called out, not even bothering to look at Natasha. Cancel my appointments for tomorrow. I'm taking a personal day to prepare for my new position. New position? Natasha asked, confused. I've been promoted to Senior Vice President at the Downtown Mitchell Corporation office, Patricia announced proudly. Effective Monday morning. Jonathan had to suppress a smile. Patricia had no idea that her promotion was actually a sideways move to a position where she would have less autonomy and would be under much closer supervision. The downtown office specialized in handling problematic employees who needed constant oversight. Congratulations, Natasha said, though Jonathan could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Thank you. I suppose you'll be reporting to whoever they hire to replace me. Let's hope they can appreciate your unique work style. The condescension in Patricia's voice made Jonathan's jaw clench, but he forced himself to remain calm. Patricia Coleman would get what she deserved, just not in the way she expected. By Friday afternoon, Patricia was gone, leaving behind a significantly more peaceful office environment. The temporary supervisor who was brought in to handle the transition was a kind, professional woman named Carol Martinez, who immediately recognized Natasha's capabilities. Ms. Williams, Carol said during their first meeting, I've been reviewing the work you've produced over the past few months. Your analysis is consistently excellent, and your attention to detail is remarkable. Natasha blinked in surprise. Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. It's not kindness, it's fact. I'm curious, have you ever considered moving into a more analytical role? Your skills seem underutilized in an administrative position. I have a business degree, Natasha admitted. I've always wanted to work in consulting, but I haven't had the opportunity. Well, that might change sooner than you think. I'll be in touch. As Carol walked away, Natasha sat in stunned silence. For the first time in years, someone in authority had recognized her potential and treated her with respect. Jonathan, who had been listening from nearby, felt a surge of satisfaction. This was exactly what he had hoped would happen when Patricia was removed from the equation. That evening, as Natasha was preparing to leave, she sought out James to share her good news. You won't believe what happened today, she said, practically glowing with excitement. The new supervisor actually complimented my work. She said my skills are underutilized. That's wonderful, Jonathan said, meaning it completely. It's about time someone recognized how talented you are. And the strangest thing, all these good things keep happening. Dad's surgery, Patricia getting promoted and leaving, now this positive feedback. It's like the universe is suddenly conspiring to help me. Jonathan felt a pang of guilt at her innocent assumption, but he was also deeply moved by her gratitude for opportunities she had always deserved. Maybe you're just finally getting the chances you've earned, he suggested. Maybe. Or maybe I have a guardian angel looking out for me, she said with a smile that made Jonathan's heart skip a beat. If only she knew how right she was and how much her guardian angel loved her. The following Monday brought another surprise. Carol Martinez requested a meeting with Natasha first thing in the morning. Ms. Williams, I have an unusual proposition for you. There's an opening for a junior business analyst position at Mitchell Corporation's consulting division. The position requires exactly your educational background and skill set. Natasha's eyes widened. Mitchell Corporation? But they're huge. I don't have the experience. Your work here demonstrates exactly the kind of analytical thinking they're looking for. The salary would be nearly double what you're making now, with full benefits and opportunities for advancement. This seems too good to be true, Natasha said, her voice filled with wonder. Good things happen to good people, Ms. Williams. The question is, are you interested? Jonathan, listening from the hallway, held his breath waiting for her answer. Yes, Natasha said firmly. Yes, I'm very interested. Excellent. You'll start next Monday. Congratulations, Ms. Williams. You're going to do great things. As Carol left, Natasha sat alone at her desk, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the change in her life. In just 1 week, she had gone from fearing for her job to landing her dream position at one of the most prestigious companies in the city. Jonathan approached her desk, genuinely happy for her success but also nervous about what this promotion would mean for their relationship. I heard the good news, he said softly. Congratulations, Natasha. You deserve this opportunity. Thank you, James. I don't even know how to process this. A week ago, I was terrified of losing my job, and now you're moving on to bigger and better things, he finished for her. I'm going to miss this place, she said, then caught herself. Well, not the place exactly, but I'm going to miss you, James. You've been such a good friend to me. Jonathan felt his heart breaking. In helping her achieve her dreams, he was losing the daily contact that had become the best part of his life. I'll miss you too, he said, more honestly than she could possibly know. Maybe we could stay in touch? Have coffee sometimes. I'd like that very much, Jonathan replied, already knowing that staying in touch would be complicated by his double identity. As Natasha packed up her desk, preparing for the next chapter of her career, Jonathan realized that his time as James Thompson was coming to an end. Soon he would have to decide whether to maintain his disguise and lose her, or reveal the truth and risk everything they had built together. The anonymous benefactor who had been secretly improving her life was about to face his biggest challenge, yet winning her heart as his true self, not the character he had created to be close to her. Natasha's first week at Mitchell Corporation was everything she had dreamed of and more. The consulting division occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown building, filled with brilliant minds working on complex strategic challenges for Fortune 500 clients. For the first time in her career, she felt like she belonged. Her supervisor, Director Lisa Chen, was everything Patricia Coleman had not been: supportive, intelligent, and genuinely interested in developing Natasha's talents. Your preliminary analysis of the Hartwell Industries case is excellent, Lisa said during their Friday afternoon meeting. Your insights into their supply chain inefficiencies are exactly what they need to hear. Thank you, Natasha replied, still adjusting to receiving genuine praise for her work. I have some additional recommendations about their market positioning that might be valuable. I'd love to hear them. In fact, why don't you prepare a full presentation for next week's client meeting? It's time you started taking the lead on some of these accounts. As Natasha left the meeting, she felt a surge of professional satisfaction she had never experienced before. This was the career she had always wanted, the opportunity to use her education and skills to make a real difference for clients. But despite her professional happiness, she found herself thinking constantly about James Thompson. They had exchanged phone numbers before she left Morrison and Associates, and they had been texting regularly, but it wasn't the same as seeing him every day. That evening, as she was reviewing case files in her new apartment, another positive change she had been able to afford with her increased salary, her phone buzzed with a text from James. How was your first week? Living the dream yet? She smiled and typed back, better than I ever imagined. Thank you for always believing in me. How are things at Morrison? Quieter without you. The new assistant is competent but not nearly as brilliant. Coffee tomorrow? I have something I want to talk to you about. Natasha's heart skipped a beat. Over the past few months, her feelings for James had evolved from gratitude to genuine affection to something deeper that she was afraid to name. He was kind, intelligent, and had an unusual way of understanding exactly what she needed to hear. The fact that he was just a janitor had never mattered to her. She had fallen for the man, not his job title. I'd love to, she texted back. Same place as usual? Actually, how about somewhere nicer? Mario's on 5th Street? 2 p.m.? Natasha was surprised. Mario's was an upscale Italian cafe, definitely not the kind of place a custodial worker would typically suggest. But James had always been full of surprises. Perfect. See you there. What Natasha didn't know was that Jonathan had spent the entire week wrestling with the most important decision of his life. Watching her succeed at Mitchell Corporation, his own company, while maintaining his false identity had become unbearable. Every day she worked in his building, she was getting closer to the truth about who he really was. Moreover, he was deeply in love with her, and he couldn't continue their relationship based on a lie. The time had come to reveal his true identity, regardless of the consequences. Saturday afternoon found Jonathan sitting at a corner table in Mario's, dressed in casual clothes that were nevertheless more expensive than anything James Thompson could afford. He had rehearsed this conversation 100 times, but he still wasn't sure how to begin. When Natasha arrived, she looked more beautiful than ever. Success had given her a new confidence that radiated from her smile to the way she carried herself. She was wearing a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, and Jonathan felt his heart race as she approached his table. "James," she said, leaning down to give him a warm hug. "You look different." "Nice different." "Thank you. You look amazing. Success suits you." As they ordered coffee and talked about her new job, Jonathan searched for the right moment to begin his confession. Natasha was animated and happy, describing her projects and her colleagues with enthusiasm. "The strangest thing is that everyone keeps talking about the CEO, Jonathan Mitchell," she said, stirring sugar into her cappuccino. "Apparently he's some kind of business genius who built the company from nothing. But he's also supposed to be really private and mysterious. No one I work with has actually met him." Jonathan nearly choked on his espresso. "What do they say about him?" "That he's brilliant but enigmatic. Some people think he's arrogant, but others say he's actually quite humble and cares deeply about his employees. Lisa mentioned that he started some kind of undercover program to understand the company culture better." "Undercover program?" "Yeah, something about executives working in different departments to see how things really operate. It sounds like something a thoughtful leader would do, don't you think?" Jonathan realized this was his opening. "Natasha, what if I told you that not everything is exactly as it seems?" She looked at him curiously. "What do you mean? What if someone you thought you knew turned out to be different than you believed? Are you speaking hypothetically, or is there something specific you want to tell me?" Jonathan took a deep breath. This was at the moment that would either bring them closer together or destroy everything they had built. "Natasha, I need to tell you something important about who I really am." But before he could continue, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "I'm sorry, it's the hospital. I need to take this." Jonathan watched her face change as she listened to the caller. Her expression went from concern to relief to confusion. "Okay, thank you for calling," she said finally, hanging up the phone. "Is everything all right?" Jonathan asked. "That was strange. The hospital called to tell me that someone made an anonymous donation to cover all of my father's ongoing cardiac care for the next 5 years. Physical therapy, medications, follow-up surgeries if needed, everything." Jonathan's heart sank. He had arranged that donation, but he had hoped it would be processed more discreetly. Who would do something like that? Natasha continued. The donation was for over $200,000. The administrator said the donor specifically requested that my father receive the best possible care. "Maybe someone who cares about you more than you realize," Jonathan said quietly. Natasha stared at him across the table, and he could see her brilliant mind working, connecting pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed. "James," she said slowly, "over the past few months, every major problem in my life has been mysteriously solved. My father's surgery was covered by a foundation I'd never heard of. Patricia got promoted and transferred just when I couldn't take working for her anymore. I got offered my dream job at exactly the right moment. And now this." Jonathan remained silent, knowing that anything he said now would either be another lie or a complete confession. "These aren't coincidences, are they?" she asked. "What do you think?" "I think someone with significant resources has been helping me. And I think the only person who would have both the means and the motivation to do all of this is someone who cares about me deeply." She leaned forward, studying his face intently. "James Thompson, who are you really?" Jonathan met her gaze steadily, knowing there was no going back. "My real name is Jonathan Mitchell. I'm the CEO of Mitchell Corporation, and I've been working undercover at Morrison & Associates for the past 4 months." Natasha's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. The sound echoed through the cafe, but neither of them moved to clean it up. "You're what?" "I'm Jonathan Mitchell. The man you've been hearing about at work. The one your colleagues say is mysterious and private." He leaned forward, his voice urgent and sincere. "But everything else is real, Natasha. My feelings for you, my admiration for your strength and intelligence, the way you make me want to be a better person, that's all completely real." Natasha sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of his revelation. The kind janitor who had been her closest friend and confidant was actually a billionaire CEO. The man she had fallen in love with had been living a lie since the day they met. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. "Known what?" That I was falling in love with you. Jonathan's heart stopped. Even in her shock and confusion, she had just told him that she loved him. I hoped, he said softly. I prayed. But I was so afraid that when you learned the truth, you'd hate me for deceiving you. I don't know what I feel right now, Natasha admitted. I'm angry that you lied to me. I'm embarrassed that I told you about wanting to work for your company without knowing who you were. But I'm also what? Also amazed that someone like you could fall for someone like me. The real me, not some fantasy version. Natasha, Jonathan said, reaching across the table to take her hand, you are the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. Your intelligence, your compassion, your strength in the face of adversity. I fell in love with who you are, not what you could become. She didn't pull her hand away, which Jonathan took as an encouraging sign. So what happens now? She asked. Do I keep working at your company? Do we pretend this conversation never happened? Do we? Now, Jonathan interrupted gently, I hope you'll give me a chance to court you properly. As myself, not as James Thompson. I want to show you that my feelings are genuine, regardless of who I am or what I own. Natasha looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception or manipulation. What she saw there was love, hope, and vulnerability that took her breath away. This is going to take some time to process, she said finally. I understand. Take all the time you need. But Jonathan? Yes. I'm glad you told me the truth. And I'm glad you're real, even if you're not who I thought you were. As they left the cafe together, both of them knew that their relationship had fundamentally changed. The foundation of lies had been replaced with truth, but now they would have to rebuild their connection based on who they really were. For the first time since he had started his undercover operation, Jonathan Mitchell felt hopeful about the future. The hardest conversation of his life was behind him, and the woman he loved was still willing to give him a chance. The real test would be whether their love could survive the transition from fantasy to reality. The week following Jonathan's revelation was the most complicated of Natasha's life. Every morning, she walked into Mitchell Corporation knowing that the mysterious CEO everyone whispered about was the same man who had once cleaned the floors at her old job. The same man who had comforted her in break rooms and helped her with impossible deadlines. The same man she had fallen in love with. Their relationship had shifted into an awkward middle ground, no longer the easy friendship of James and Natasha, but not yet the romantic partnership that Jonathan hoped for. They had agreed to meet for dinner on Friday evening to have a longer, more detailed conversation about their future. But on Wednesday morning, Natasha's carefully compartmentalized world collided in a way she hadn't anticipated. Natasha, her supervisor Lisa Chin said, approaching her desk with an unusual expression, I have an interesting request. Mr. Mitchell wants to personally review your analysis of the Hartwell Industries case. Natasha's stomach dropped. Mr. Mitchell? The CEO? Yes. Apparently he's heard good things about your work and wants to see it firsthand. He's requested a meeting with you this afternoon at 3 o'clock. As Lisa walked away, Natasha sat frozen at her desk. Jonathan wanted to meet with her professionally, in their real roles as CEO and junior analyst. The thought terrified her. How was she supposed to act? Should she pretend they had never met? Should she acknowledge their personal relationship? She spent the morning alternately panicking and trying to focus on her work. By lunchtime she had made a decision. She called Jonathan's office directly. Jonathan Mitchell's office, this is Rebecca speaking. Hi, this is Natasha Williams from the consulting division. I understand Mr. Mitchell wants to meet with me this afternoon? Yes, Ms. Williams. 3 o'clock in the executive conference room on the 42nd floor. Could you tell him that I need to speak with him before the meeting? It's important. There was a pause. Hold on just a moment. A few seconds later, Jonathan's familiar voice came on the line. Natasha? Is everything all right? We need to talk before this meeting. I don't know how to handle this situation. Come up now. We'll figure it out together. 20 minutes later, Natasha found herself in Jonathan's real office for the first time. It was exactly what she would have expected from a billionaire CEO, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, expensive art on the walls, a massive desk that probably cost more than her car. But the man behind the desk was still recognizably the James Thompson she had fallen for, despite his expensive suit and confident demeanor. Thank you for coming up, Jonathan said, standing as she entered. I know this is awkward. Awkward doesn't begin to cover it, Natasha replied, looking around the opulent office. Jonathan, I can't pretend to be meeting you for the first time when your employees are watching. But I also can't act like we're, whatever we are, in a professional setting. I understand. What if we handle this as straightforwardly as possible? I'll introduce myself, you can acknowledge that we've met before, and we'll focus on your work. No one needs to know the details of our relationship. Our relationship, Natasha repeated. What exactly is our relationship, Jonathan? Because I honestly don't know anymore. Jonathan walked around his desk to stand closer to her, but maintained a respectful distance. I'm hoping it's the beginning of something real and lasting. But I understand if you need time to figure out how you feel about everything. It's not about time, Natasha said, her voice stronger than she felt. It's about trust. For months, I shared my deepest fears and dreams with someone I thought I knew. Every vulnerable moment, every struggle I confided in you, you were watching it all from a position of incredible power. I never used that power against you, Jonathan said quickly. Everything I did was to help you, to protect you. Without my knowledge or consent, Natasha pointed out. You made decisions about my life, my career, my family's welfare, and I had no idea it was happening. Jonathan felt the weight of her words. She was right and he knew it. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. When? When should you have told me? The first day we met? After our first real conversation? Before you helped my father? Natasha shook her head. There was no good time because the whole thing was built on deception. So what are you saying? That we can't move forward? Natasha looked out the window at the city below, gathering her thoughts. I'm saying that I need to understand who you really are, not who I thought you were. James Thompson was kind and humble and understood what it was like to struggle. Who is Jonathan Mitchell? I'm still the same person, Jonathan insisted. The money and power don't change who I am inside. Don't they? Natasha challenged. You own the building where I work. You could fire me with a phone call. You've already manipulated my career path once. How do I know that anything I achieve going forward is based on my own merits? The question hit Jonathan like a physical blow. He hadn't considered how his intervention might undermine her confidence in her own abilities. Your talent is real, Natasha. Your intelligence, your analytical skills, your insights, none of that came from me. I just made sure you got the opportunity to showcase what you already had. But how will I ever know for sure? She asked, and he could hear the pain in her voice. How will I know if I'm succeeding because I'm good at my job, or because the CEO is in love with me? Before Jonathan could answer, there was a knock at his office door. Come in, he called. Rebecca entered, looking slightly uncomfortable. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the 3 o'clock meeting participants are starting to arrive. Jonathan looked at Natasha, who straightened her shoulders with visible determination. We'll continue this conversation later, she said. Right now, I have a presentation to give. The meeting that followed was one of the most professionally challenging experiences of both their lives. Natasha presented her analysis of the Hartwell Industries case with brilliant clarity and confidence, while Jonathan had to evaluate her work objectively despite his personal feelings. The other executives in the room, Lisa Chen, senior partner Michael Roberts, and 2 client representatives, were clearly impressed by Natasha's insights and recommendations. Ms. Williams, Michael Roberts said as the presentation concluded, this is exceptional work. Your strategic recommendations could save Hartwell Industries millions in operational costs. Thank you, Natasha replied professionally. I believe the key is addressing their supply chain inefficiencies before attempting to expand into new markets. Jonathan had remained mostly quiet during the presentation, but as the other participants began discussing implementation strategies, he spoke up. Ms. Williams, your analysis identified several issues that our more senior consultants missed. How long have you been with the company? 2 weeks, sir, Natasha answered, meeting his gaze steadily. 2 weeks, Jonathan repeated, allowing genuine surprise to color his voice for the benefit of the others. That's remarkable insight for someone so new to the organization. I had good training at my previous position, Natasha said diplomatically. As the meeting concluded and the other participants filed out, Lisa Chen lingered behind. Mr. Mitchell, she said, I think we may have found a rising star in Ms. Williams. Her analytical capabilities are extraordinary. I agree, Jonathan replied. Make sure she's given challenging assignments that match her abilities. After Lisa left, Jonathan and Natasha were alone again. That was well done, he said sincerely. You handled that perfectly. Thank you, Natasha replied, but her tone remained formal. If there's nothing else, I should get back to my desk. Natasha, wait. Jonathan moved toward her, then stopped himself. Are we still on for dinner Friday night? I know things are complicated, but I'd like the chance to explain more about why I did what I did. She studied his face for a long moment. Friday night. 7 o'clock. But Jonathan? This time I choose the restaurant. Somewhere public, neutral territory. Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable. As Natasha left his office, Jonathan remained standing by the windows, wrestling with the possibility that his deception might have cost him the love of his life. He had thought he was protecting her and helping her achieve her dreams, but maybe he had only succeeded in making her question everything about herself. That evening, Natasha called her best friend from college, Keisha, needing someone to talk to who wasn't involved in the situation. "Let me get this straight," Keisha said after Natasha explained everything. "The janitor you fell for is actually a billionaire CEO, and he's been secretly solving all your problems for months?" "That's the short version, yes." "Girl, this sounds like something out of a romance novel. Are you sure this isn't some elaborate fantasy?" "I wish it were," Natasha sighed. "It would be a lot simpler." "Okay, let's break this down. Do you still have feelings for him?" "Yes," Natasha admitted. "That's what makes this so hard. I love the man I got to know, but I don't know if that man was real or just a character he was playing." "What does your gut tell you?" Natasha thought about all their conversations, all the moments of genuine connection and understanding. "My gut tells me that his feelings were real, even if his identity wasn't. But Keisha, how do I trust someone who lied to me for months? And how do I ever know if I'm succeeding on my own merits or because he's pulling strings behind the scenes?" "Those are valid concerns," Keisha agreed. "But honey, maybe the question isn't whether you can trust him, but whether you're willing to find out. People make mistakes, even billionaire CEOs. The question is whether he's learned from this one." After hanging up, Natasha sat in her apartment, surrounded by the new furniture and books she had been able to afford with her promotion. Everything in her life had improved dramatically in recent months, but now she wondered how much of it was real. Friday evening couldn't come soon enough. It was time for Jonathan Mitchell to prove that the man she had fallen in love with really existed beneath all the wealth and power. The future of their relationship depended on whether he could convince her that his love was genuine, and whether she could learn to trust him despite the lies that had brought them together. Friday evening found Natasha waiting at a small bistro across town, far from the corporate district where their complicated story had begun. She had chosen this restaurant specifically because it was unpretentious and ordinary, the kind of place where James Thompson might have taken her, not where Jonathan Mitchell would typically dine. Jonathan arrived exactly on time, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He looked more like the man she had fallen in love with, though she could now see the expensive watch and perfectly tailored clothes that should have given away his true identity months ago. "Thank you for coming," he said as he sat across from her. "I almost didn't," Natasha admitted. "I've spent the past 2 days wondering if anything between us was real." "I understand why you'd feel that way. But Natasha, I need you to know that every moment we shared, every conversation, every feeling, that was all real. The only thing that was false was my name and job title. Those aren't small things, Jonathan. Identity matters. Context matters." "You're right," he agreed. "And I need to explain why I did what I did, not to excuse it but so you can understand." Over the next hour, Jonathan told her everything. How he had built his company from nothing after growing up in foster care. How success had isolated him from real human connection. How he had started the Undercover program because he felt disconnected from the people who worked for him. "I wasn't looking for love when I walked into Morrison and Associates," he said. "I was looking for understanding. But then I saw you crying in that break room and something in my chest broke. Here was this brilliant, kind, strong woman being crushed by a system that should have celebrated her talents. So you decided to fix my life without telling me?" "I decided to help someone who deserved better than what she was getting. But somewhere along the way, helping you became about loving you, not just correcting injustices." Natasha stirred her coffee, processing his words. "What you did with my job, my father's medical care, I'm grateful for all of it. But it also makes me question everything about myself. How do I know I earned my position at Mitchell Corporation? How do I know I'm actually good at my job?" Jonathan leaned forward, his voice intense with conviction. "Because I've seen your work, Natasha. Not just the reports and presentations but the way your mind works. You see connections that other people miss. You solve problems that experienced consultants struggle with. That analysis you presented this week? I've had senior partners with 10 years of experience produce less insightful work. But you're not exactly an objective observer." "Then let me prove it to you," Jonathan said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick envelope and placed it on the table between them. "What's this?" "Job offers. 3 of them from consulting firms that compete directly with Mitchell Corporation. I had a headhunter reach out to them with your resume and work samples anonymously. They don't know you work for me, they don't know we have any relationship at all. Natasha opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were 3 formal job offers, each from a prestigious consulting firm, each offering salaries comparable to or higher than what she was making at Mitchell Corporation. This one is from Henderson and Associates, she said, staring at the letterhead. They're huge. They want to hire you as a senior analyst, not junior. Based purely on the quality of your work. And this one from Strategic Solutions. She looked up at him in amazement. Jonathan, these are dream jobs. Any of these companies would be incredible to work for. I know. And I want you to seriously consider them. Natasha set the offers down, confused. You want me to leave Mitchell Corporation? I want you to have choices. I want you to know that your success isn't dependent on me or my feelings for you. If you take one of these positions, you'll know that you earned it entirely on your own merits. But what about us? What about your feelings for me? Jonathan's expression was serious but determined. My feelings for you aren't conditional on where you work. If you choose to leave Mitchell Corporation, I'll still love you. If you choose to stay, I'll still love you. But I need you to make that decision based on what's best for your career, not on what you think I want to hear. For the first time since learning his true identity, Natasha felt the knot of anxiety in her chest begin to loosen. This was the Jonathan Mitchell she needed to see, the one who put her needs ahead of his own desires. These offers are incredible, she said, reviewing the details again. The Henderson position would be perfect for my long-term career goals. Then take it, Jonathan said without hesitation. Take whichever one excites you most. Just like that? You wouldn't try to convince me to stay? Natasha, I spent months lying to you because I thought I knew what was best for your life. I'm not going to make that mistake again. This decision is yours alone. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Natasha spoke. Can I ask you something? Anything. When you were James Thompson, what did you imagine your future would look like? Did you think you'd keep pretending forever? Jonathan smiled ruefully. Honestly, I was living day to day, just grateful to be near you. I knew I'd have to tell you the truth eventually, but I kept putting it off because I was terrified of losing you. And now I'm still terrified of losing you, but I'd rather lose you as myself than keep you through deception. Natasha reached across the table and took his hand, the first time she had initiated physical contact since learning his identity. Jonathan, I need to tell you something. Despite everything that's happened, despite my confusion and anger and uncertainty, I'm still in love with you. Not with your money or your company or your power. With you. The man who helped me believe in myself when I had lost all confidence. Jonathan's eyes filled with tears. Does that mean you can forgive me? That we can try to build something real together? It means I want to try, Natasha said. But we'll have to do it differently than before. No more secrets, no more grand gestures without my knowledge. If we're going to be together, we have to be partners in everything. I want that more than anything, Jonathan said, squeezing her hand. But first, you need to decide about these job offers. I want you to choose the path that makes you happiest, regardless of how it affects us. Natasha looked down at the offers again, then back at Jonathan's face. She saw love there and hope, but also genuine concern for her well-being above his own. I've made my decision, she said. Already? I'm going to turn down all 3 offers. Jonathan's face fell. Natasha, please don't make this decision based on. I'm not, she interrupted. I'm making it based on something you said earlier. You told me that I solve problems and see connections that experienced consultants miss. You said my work is exceptional. It is. Then I want to stay at Mitchell Corporation not because the CEO loves me but because I want to prove to myself and to everyone else that I belong there. I want to earn promotions based on my performance. I want to build my reputation on my own terms. Are you sure? I'm sure. But I have conditions. Name them. First, you don't interfere in my career anymore. No special treatment, no secret help, no pulling strings. If I succeed, it needs to be because I earned it. Agreed. Second, we take our personal relationship slowly. I need time to get to know Jonathan Mitchell, not just the man I thought was James Thompson. I understand. And third, Natasha said with a smile that reminded him of all the reasons he had fallen in love with her, you have to promise me that you'll never lie to me again. Not about big things, not about small things. If we're going to make this work, it has to be built on complete honesty. I promise, Jonathan said solemnly. No more lies, no more deceptions, no more grand gestures without your permission. As they left the restaurant together, walking slowly through the quiet streets, both of them felt like they were beginning a new chapter of their story. The foundation of lies had been replaced with truth, and now they could build something real and lasting. "So," Natasha said as they reached her car, "what happens now?" "Now," Jonathan replied, "I ask if I can take you on a proper first date. As myself this time." "I'd like that," she said. "But somewhere modest. I want to get to know the man behind the fortune, not be impressed by what you can afford. How about a picnic in the park? I make excellent sandwiches." Natasha laughed, the first truly carefree laugh she'd had since learning his identity. "Perfect. It sounds like something James Thompson would have suggested." "Maybe that's because James Thompson was just me without the money," Jonathan said. "The parts of me that mattered most were always real." As they said goodnight, both of them knew that they had turned a corner. The hardest conversations were behind them, and the future uncertain as it was held the promise of real love built on truth instead of deception. The billionaire CEO and the talented analyst were ready to discover if their love could survive in the real world, where there would be no more hiding behind false identities or impossible circumstances. For the first time in months, both of them were exactly who they claimed to be. 6 months later, the conference room on the 42nd floor of Mitchell Corporation was filled with executives, clients, and board members, all gathered for the most important presentation of Natasha's career. She stood at the head of the long table, confident and poised, presenting her strategic recommendations for a major client acquisition. "As you can see from the data," she said, clicking to the next slide, "implementing these operational improvements will result in a 30% increase in efficiency within the first year." Jonathan sat at the far end of the table, listening with pride as the woman he loved demonstrated the brilliance he had recognized from their very first conversation. True to his promise, he hadn't interfered in her career advancement. Every promotion, every high-profile assignment, every recognition she had received had been earned through her own merit. "Ms. Williams," said board member Helen Crawford, "your analysis is comprehensive and insightful. I'm particularly impressed by your innovative approach to supply chain optimization." "Thank you," Natasha replied. "I believe that sustainable growth requires looking beyond traditional solutions to find creative approaches that benefit all stakeholders." As the presentation concluded and the clients expressed their enthusiasm for working with Mitchell Corporation, Jonathan felt a surge of admiration for how far Natasha had come. In 6 months, she had established herself as one of the company's most valuable analysts, earning the respect of colleagues who had no idea of her relationship with the CEO. After the meeting, as the conference room emptied, Jonathan approached Natasha. "Exceptional work," he said formally, aware that other employees were still within earshot. "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell," she replied with equal professionalism, though her eyes sparkled with warmth. They had developed this delicate balance over the months, maintaining complete professionalism at work while building their personal relationship outside the office. It hadn't always been easy, but it had allowed Natasha to establish her professional reputation without any suggestion of favoritism. That evening, they met at their favorite restaurant, the same small bistro where they had their difficult conversation 6 months earlier. It had become a tradition, returning to the place where they had decided to build their relationship on truth instead of deception. "So," Jonathan said as they were seated, "how does it feel to have just landed the biggest client acquisition of the quarter?" "It feels incredible," Natasha admitted, allowing herself to show the excitement she had to contain during the business meeting. 3 months ago, I was terrified that I didn't belong in that room. Today, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. You've always belonged there. You just needed the chance to prove it to yourself." Their relationship had deepened considerably over the past 6 months, built on the foundation of honesty they had established. Jonathan had kept his promise never to lie to her again, even about small things. Natasha had learned to trust him gradually, seeing through his actions that his love for her was genuine and not dependent on control or manipulation. "I have something I want to discuss with you," Jonathan said, his tone becoming more serious. Natasha looked up from her menu, immediately attentive. "What is it?" "The board has been pressuring me to name a successor as CEO. I'm not planning to retire anytime soon, but they want someone groomed for the position." "That makes sense. Who are you considering?" "Actually, I've been thinking about restructuring the company entirely. Instead of a traditional CEO succession, I want to create a partnership model. Multiple leaders sharing responsibility for different aspects of the business." "That's an interesting approach. Very progressive. I'd like you to be one of those partners, Natasha. Head of Strategic Development, with a direct path to the executive board." Natasha set down her water glass, stunned. Jonathan, that's an incredible opportunity. But are you sure this isn't about our personal relationship? I'm sure. The board suggested you specifically after reviewing your performance over the past 6 months. Helen Crawford was particularly impressed with your presentation today. What did you tell them about us? Nothing. As far as the board knows, you're a talented employee who happens to be dating the CEO. They don't know our history or how we met. Your professional reputation is entirely your own. Natasha considered the offer carefully. The position would put her at the highest levels of corporate leadership, with the opportunity to shape strategy for one of the country's most successful companies. Can I think about it? Of course. But Natasha, I want you to know that this offer isn't conditional on our relationship. Even if we broke up tomorrow, I'd still want you in this role. Thank you for saying that. It means everything to me. As they continued their dinner, the conversation turned to lighter topics: their upcoming weekend plans, a book Natasha was reading, Jonathan's efforts to reconnect with his former foster siblings. Their relationship had grown comfortable and natural, built on shared interests and genuine affection rather than dramatic circumstances. Can I ask you something? Natasha said as they were walking to their cars after dinner. Always. Do you ever miss being James Thompson? The simplicity of that life. Jonathan considered the question seriously. Sometimes I miss the anonymity. Being able to connect with people without them knowing about my wealth or position. But I don't miss the deception. Being able to be completely honest with you is worth more than any convenience. I'm glad you feel that way. Because I have something to tell you too. Oh. I love you, Jonathan Mitchell. Not the mysterious janitor I fell for, not the powerful CEO who could solve all my problems, but you. The man who makes me laugh, who challenges me intellectually, who supports my dreams even when they don't include him. Jonathan stopped walking and turned to face her fully. I love you too, Natasha Williams. More than I thought it was possible to love another person. So what happens now? She asked, echoing the question she had posed months earlier. Now, Jonathan said, reaching into his jacket pocket, I ask you something I've been wanting to ask for weeks. Natasha's breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box. Natasha, I know we've built our relationship slowly and carefully, and I don't want to rush you into anything. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? The ring was beautiful but not ostentatious, a classic solitaire that reflected her style perfectly. But more than the ring, it was the vulnerability in Jonathan's eyes that moved her to tears. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I'll marry you. As Jonathan slipped the ring onto her finger, both of them felt the weight of how far they had come. From a chance meeting in a break room to this moment of commitment, their journey had been complicated and difficult, but it had led them to something real and lasting. I have one condition, Natasha said as they embraced. Anything. The wedding has to be simple. I want to marry you, not your fortune. Perfect. I was hoping you'd say that. 1 year later, Natasha Williams Mitchell stood in the executive boardroom of Mitchell Corporation, not as the CEO's wife, but as the newly appointed Chief Strategic Officer. She had accepted the partnership role and had spent the past year transforming the company's approach to client relations and business development. Her success had attracted attention from business magazines and industry publications, all praising her innovative strategies and rapid rise in the corporate world. None of them knew the unusual story of how she had met her husband, and both Jonathan and Natasha preferred it that way. Their wedding had been exactly as she requested, simple and intimate, attended by family and close friends. Jonathan's former foster siblings had served as groomsmen, while Natasha's college friends had been her bridesmaids. The ceremony had taken place in the same park where they had their first official date as themselves. As Natasha concluded her quarterly presentation to the board, she caught Jonathan's eye across the room. He smiled at her with the same warmth and admiration she had seen in James Thompson's eyes that first day in the break room. After the meeting, they walked to the elevator together, maintaining their professional demeanor until the doors closed and they were alone. How does it feel to officially be the youngest Chief Strategic Officer in the company's history? Jonathan asked. It feels like a dream come true, Natasha replied. But you know what the best part is? What? I know I earned it. Every step of the way, every achievement, every recognition, it's all mine. Built on my own merit. You always deserved success, Natasha. I just helped remove some of the obstacles that were keeping you from showing the world who you really are. As the elevator opened onto the executive floor, they separated again, returning to their respective offices and responsibilities. But both of them carried with them the knowledge that they had built something extraordinary together, a love story that had survived deception and emerged stronger on the other side. That evening, as they sat in their modest home, Jonathan had surprised everyone by choosing a comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood rather than a mansion. Natasha reflected on how much her life had changed. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been working undercover that day?" she asked. "Every day," Jonathan admitted. "And I'm grateful every day that I was there when you needed someone to believe in you. I'm grateful too. Not just for the opportunities you helped create, but for the man you turned out to be when I finally got to know the real you." As they sat together, planning their future and dreaming about the family they hoped to have someday, both Jonathan and Natasha knew that their love story was just beginning. They had started with deception and built something true. They had overcome obstacles and emerged stronger. Most importantly, they had learned that real love isn't about grand gestures or dramatic circumstances. It's about choosing each other every day, supporting each other's dreams, and building a life together based on trust, respect, and genuine affection. The billionaire CEO and the talented executive had found something more valuable than all the money in the world. They had found each other, exactly as they were meant to be. Dear listeners, thank you for joining Jonathan and Natasha on their incredible journey from deception to true love. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful relationships come from the most unexpected circumstances, and that real love can overcome even the biggest obstacles when both people are willing to fight for it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think about Jonathan's decision to work undercover? Do you believe Natasha made the right choice in staying at Mitchell Corporation? And what was your favorite moment in their love story? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback helps me create better stories for you. Also, what kind of love story would you like to see next? A second chance romance? An enemies to lovers tale? Or perhaps another billionaire story with a different twist? Let me know what captures your imagination.